Hello and welcome to sim.bc, where it right now is 17:44, so just 5:45 in the evening. And yeah, I was gonna start with saying that tomorrow, mate, is gonna be a bit of a rocky video probably, because tomorrow me and my mate is going to engage in what we think is a hilarious thing, because it's the last day of school, it's the last presentation, and well, it's just the last day overall at Kedge. So it's going to be awesome, it's going to be all good. So we thought, why not adapt, since both of us now have watched the BMS, the Blue Mountain State Series, why not engage in a little bit of Marathon Monday, right? Which is basically, and before I say this, I do not, encourage you to drink if you're not at a legal drinking age in your country. Of course, you should know your own limits, and rather you drink too little than a bit too little than a bit too much. And I absolutely don't encourage you to drink. That's not what I'm saying. And now with all of that out of the way, the disclaimer, so to say, don't drink, drinking is bad. Just think about, if drinking was a drug that was going to be introduced nowadays, it probably wouldn't be introduced because it has so many damaging effects. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you see it, it's an intricate part of our society today. Now, so what I wanted to say is that we're going to engage in a little bit of Marathon Monday. And what is that? Well, it's basically, with all the disclaimers, you're drinking from sun up to sun up. So basically, from the sun goes up on Monday till the sun goes up on Tuesday. It's going to be all the good, it's going to be all great. Of course, that might have a bit of an impact, right, on my video tomorrow if I choose to make one, and the video on Tuesday, right? So we'll see how that all works out. Hopefully, going to be all good and all fine, all dandy, with a bit of, unfortunate events. It might not be, but it's a bit of college thing. It's the thing you do at college, right? And I usually don't go out that much, so I thought, if I have one time per semester or whatever when I really go out and about, what does it matter, right? What does it matter? So anyway, that's not why you're here, is it now? No, it's because we're going to go through the DESC method of solving and handling conflicts. Yes, that is correct. Also going to throw out there before I get going that tomorrow is my last presentation. I know I said it, but tomorrow is the last presentation. Tomorrow I'm done. At 10 o'clock tomorrow, I'll be done with my semester here, which is kind of scary in a way, but funny in another way. Depends on how you took my video from yesterday. You can know what I thought about the entire semester. Obviously, I think I'm going to do a bit of a review of the entire semester and the experience in Bordeaux and so on and so forth in the future, but now let's get into it. So the DESC method of solving conflicts. Now there are 4 steps. It is describing the conflict, that's the first one. Describing the conflict, what it is, why it is, so on and so forth. Then it goes into emotion, right? Expressing your emotion, more specifically, expressing the emotions that have been caused by this conflict. Then it is coming into solution, basically finding different solutions for this problem, right? We want to solve the problem. So in order to solve a problem, we need a solution to the problem. So it's only logical that it's going to be a problem. There's going to be a solution. But then why not stop there? Why not have it a 3-step model? Because if we have the solution, we can stand right there, right? It's good enough. No, it's actually not, because then you have to evaluate the consequences, right, mate, of what this solution can impact, like the impact the solution has on society, your little circle of friends, your group, the project that you're working on. The deadline might be changed, the resources that are getting input to your project might be different. There's all of these things that you have to consider. But without any further ado, mates, let's get into it and discuss the first one. I know I've said it a couple of times now, but now we're actually starting, right? So the first one is describing the facts and similarities of the conflict, or facts and similar, I would say. Not the similarities. Maybe if you say, oh, there's a similarity between this conflict A and that conflict B, how did we solve that one? How did we go about expressing our emotions in that one? And how did we go about seeing consequences in that conflict? Of course, that could be a thing. But basically what you're doing, when you're looking at a conflict in order to solve it, if you're a manager, yeah, and Gary and Jerry, me mates, me top bros, they're in a bit of a conflict. And I'm standing there, right, and I'm thinking that Gary and Jerry, they're in a conflict. How am I going to solve this? I'm moving in there and I'm saying, can you please describe the conflict for me? Obviously, they're probably going to give it quite a biased answer dependent on what the conflict is about. But let's just say that it's about something that none of them care about. It's going to be about something that has to do with the project. Not that they're not involved in the project. It's just that they might lack the, personal connection to the project. They might think about it as like, okay, I'm working here. This is my job, but not further than that. So, a bit of a theory X. thrown in there in the mix, you know, all of the terminology. But then we have these two people, Gary and Jerry, and what I want from them to begin with, for me as a manager, to begin understanding what they're actually arguing about, what a conflict is actually about, I would like them to describe the conflict, right, to me as the manager. So I would maybe ask Gary, like, can you describe the conflict? What do you think is the conflict here? Why do you think the conflict is as it is? And, well, why did it happen to begin with? And then Gary's going to give me an answer, and then I'm going to ask the same thing to Jerry, and Jerry's going to give me an answer. Depending on the answers, I now have probably two biased sides of the same problem, but I can derive that it's, you know, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle of these. Now you can run into the case where you have one very noble person who is giving the objective view, and the other person is giving a biased view, and hence the reality is skewed because you think that both of them are biased. But this is, of course, based on your interpretation of the people that are inside of the conflict. Because you're the manager, you've probably known them for a while. This is probably in the storming state or later in the group forming and the group development stage. So in the forming stage, you've probably gotten to know them a bit, you know, during a kickoff or a team building exercise or something like that. So you probably know who's going to be the most biased, who's not going to be biased at all, or at least very little, and then you can take that into consideration. Now that you know this, and you have a similar idea, you have the grasp of where the conflict actually is, you know, objectively. You have kind of an understanding of what's actually going on here. Now you have to move into the next level, and this is, I would say, arguably the most important one and the hardest one of the 4 steps, and that is expressing emotions. Because there are so many macho people, no matter the gender, right, who is withholding emotions and withholding what they're actually thinking and what they thought was correct and what they thought was not correct, just because it shows that they're showing emotions, and for some reason that is considered to be weak when you show emotions in some cultures. I totally disagree. I think that, you know, crying and be angry and laugh and showing emotions and actually being able to talk about the emotions, there's nothing cooler than that, right? And I know that many people don't share my judgment on that, but that's my opinion on the matter. But it's very hard to get it out of people at sometimes, right? So this is where you as a manager have to go in, and you might have to isolate the people, talk to them directly. You might have to bring in a bigger group. You might have to put them in a different context, right? Maybe you have to talk with them outside of work or outside the place where the conflict or the incident took place. Maybe you have to change locations. Maybe that's all that it takes for them to, like, get out. Maybe you have to share something emotional yourself with them so that they trust you, so that they have leverage, so to say, on you, so that they don't feel like they're just exposing themselves out in the open. But getting these emotions out, and why, or rather the implications of the conflict, why are they actually involved in the conflict, even though it's just, you know, work related in this case. If we're going with the same example as the previous step, let's say it's just work related, they're lacking the personal enthusiasm of actually getting into the problem. But both Gary and Jerry might say, well, even though we don't care that much about the actual outcome of the project, not that we don't care, but we lack the, what should we say, the extended concern of the problem, right? It doesn't concern us if we meet the deadline or not. Maybe it does in some implicit way, but it not really, right? But there might be some underlying assumptions to why there is a conflict to begin with. Maybe they have misunderstood what they were supposed to do. Maybe that's where the conflict is coming from, and then people might have, you know, thrown names to each other and gone into territory that necessarily didn't have to be touched. And maybe there are some old conflicts that are driven up when they're discussing the problem that none of them actually care about, but that's just the escalates, the one thing that sparks the entire conflict, right? There could be underlying conflicts that none of them have talked about before, but now that there is a conflict, they're taking up all of those stuff as well. So therefore it's important that you make them express their emotions, so that you will get a clean slate for moving into the future. And when you're moving into the future, of course, when you're making a solution, the third step, you have to consider the description of what the conflict is actually about. What is the cornerstone of the conflict? And based on what the cornerstone of the conflict is, how is this in relation to their expressed emotions? What do they think about the cornerstone of the conflict? Why do they think about it as they do? Why not in a different way? Can I change the way they're thinking about it? Can I enhance it? Can I decrease it? Why not? Those are the things you need to take into consideration when making a solution, because if you don't, then the consequences might be huge, right? Because then the consequences might be that some people will feel left out, some people will feel left behind and compromised, and yeah, all that and so forth. So you need to make the optimum solution, or you can just punish them equally, right? And say, you're both wrong, and now we're gonna do this instead, because then none of you are right. And if none of you are right, then you can stop having this conflict because it doesn't exist anymore. That's also, of course, one way of going about it. But solution is building on the description and the emotional expression of what they thought the problem was. And you as the manager have to go in and actually make the solution. However, a good manager just don't take a solution and take a step toward, and a good manager, let's say, just don't go in and say, this is the solution. That's what I meant. A really good manager goes in and makes them a part of the solution, the people who are in there. Not only describing their emotions and expressing their emotions and describing their problem, but also how can we together work towards a better solution so that they feel that they're a part of the solution making process, because that will make it last longer in theory, right? Depends on how you go about it and how they go about it and how well they take it. Of course, yet again, there can be bias in the solution, of course, from their side and their perspective, but I would say that it's better, even if it will probably take a longer time and involve more implications, that you involve the people in the solution making process, because it tends to build a longer lasting solution. Then we're moving into the consequences. The consequences obviously are building on the solution and how well you as a manager handled how you handle the expression of emotions and how you interpreted the description of the conflict and how you went about actually making the solution. Did you make your solution in isolation of the other people? Did you include them in the solution making process? Did you only take their opinions into account but then made the solution by yourself anyway, or were they actually involved in making the entire solution from the beginning to end so that they actually felt that they were inside it? And if you did, what consequences will this lead to? Now there will be both good, or potentially there could be good and bad consequences. Bad consequences, if you made the solution in isolation, you actually didn't address the problem at all and the conflict continues. That could be a consequence. That could be very plausible. It might be that you, yet again, misunderstood the entire conflict and made a bad solution because of that, and that leads to bad consequences. Could be that this is actually solving a consequence, this solves a conflict and hence can be a reference point for future conflicts, because this solution was so good that it built a better, a better collaboration within the organization between these two parties involved in the conflict, and therefore next time people are having the same kind of conflict, they can look towards this case and therefore they can make the same solution or adjust the same solution to their situation. So there are many good and potentially bad consequences. What I would like to bring up yet again is that consequences can also be good, just because consequences is generally intercorrelated with the bad things. But yeah, that was everything for me today, mates. Well, maybe it was a bit rambly. That was the DESC method to solve conflicts. It's description, emotion, solution, and consequences. The DESC method. Have a nice one, mates. I'll see you tomorrow.